Sure. All right. Thanks, Lance. So let's see. So I think we've got. We can probably go ahead and get started then. It looks like we've had a good number of folks on the call already. Actually, can't quite tell how many, but it looks like.
Why don't you go ahead and call the roll, and people can reply, and we'll have that on the record.
Sorry, can you say that again, Mike?
All right. So, Nolan, I was suggesting that why don't you go ahead and call the roll, and then people can go off mute and then reply here or present, and then they can go back on mute. Let's start with that.
All right. Let's see. Where can I see participants? Actually, is there? Oh, here we go. Got it. Okay. All right. Caitlin Hedberg.
Present.
Carla.
Here.
Jed.
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Jimmy.
I'm here.
Jonathan.
Aquí.
Let's see. Lindsay.
Here.
Lindy.
Here.
Alyssa.
Here.
Tasha.
Here.
And for folks that are not BAC members that are our guests, I think we've got Mr. Perez Verdia from the Assembly.
Yep, I'm here.
Ms. LaFrance from the Assembly.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
And we've also got Lila.
I'm here.
OMB. Andy from ASD.
Yep, I'm here.
Right, as well as Desiree. And maybe she's not here actually. All right. Well, let's see. I think that's our roll call for now.
Okay.
Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda? And if so, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve. This is Alyssa.
Second, Carla.
All right. Any opposition to that? Otherwise, we can proceed. Excellent. All right. So I think our first informational report is with the Assembly. So I'm going to hand things over to Mr. Perez Verdia and Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Nolan. And thank you all for being here and for inviting us. So a few things on the Assembly side. This Tuesday, you may have heard we extended or voted to extend the emergency proclamation through the end of next month, July 31st, per the Mayor's request. And we received a number of emails and tremendous amount of constituent feedback. There continues to be some confusion between the emergency proclamation and the emergency orders. A lot of folks are very concerned about returning to a hunker down situation. But as the mayor has said, understanding is that there are no plans. Of course, we don't know what's ahead, but to move back into that situation again. On the Assembly side, too, we've been really focused on conversations surrounding the COVID-19 relief funds and have been, and I know Nolan and Alyssa, I think, as well, you all participated in the roundtable, and thank you for being a part of that. We're discussing in committee, too, some of the specific uses of funds, and we will be continuing those conversations along with identifying committee budget priorities. Another track of conversations on the Assembly side has been, as I think you all are aware, the alcohol tax revenues. And in the Health Policy Committee meeting yesterday, we had a number of presenters, 10 actually, who shared some details about what sorts of services their organizations provide when it comes to early interventions and treatment. So we heard from ASD on pre-K, Awake. We heard from Trevor Shores from the Children's Trust, and Susie Pearson from Awake, and STAR. We had folks, Cook Timber Tribal Council. And And so we're very interested in continuing that conversation into next month concerning how much should be allocated towards those early intervention efforts. I mean, we're in this unusual situation, right, where we haven't had that kind of funding stream for those kinds of services, and we tend to be more reactionary and focused on the big issues of the moment and intervening later when it comes to issues of crime and homelessness. So that's a conversation we'll be continuing into next month, and I know Mr. Perez-Verdia can speak to the public safety piece of it and wildlife mitigation and the interest to include some funding on the assembly side possibly for those efforts. And then, as you all know, with tensions high and demonstrations and civil unrest in the lower 48, we've had discussions with APD individually as assembly members, and then a little bit on Tuesday. You may have seen the letter from Chief Dahl. The focus on some of the discussions has been about body cameras and the issue of how to fund those, and then also privacy concerns that have come up in previous conversations. So I think there'll be more on that, as well as that broader issue of improving the relationship between the community and the police here. So thanks. Those are some of the high points, and Cameron has other things to add as well.
Hi everyone, this is Cameron Perez-Verdia. I think you covered most of the high points. I would just add that the Public Safety Committee, along with the Homeless Committee and the Health Policy Committee, all three will be having conversations specifically around the alcohol tax. We have a whole timeline for those conversations to happen, and then there is a process of going out into the community and getting feedback from the community about where they see the priorities and how they would like those funds to be spent. So there's a sort of an extensive process for making sure that there's a lot of conversation about that prior to the budget, the development later in the year. And then I guess I would just add that the Public Safety Committee has, as mentioned by Member LaFrance, has been talking about, what are some of the budget priorities for the fire department, for the police department, for the Department of Justice, and the areas that they see both immediate need and also thinking long term about what kinds of investments are necessary to ensure that we are safe and making sure that all of the areas that each one of those departments sit to take care of are adequately funded. So that's all I have to add, and I look forward to the conversation today. Thanks.
Good. Yes, thanks to both of you. I think something that we've been getting a request that we've been getting for BAC is to look carefully at the uses of the CARES funds that the community is going to get, and so I think that's going to be something that this group is being asked to put some thought into, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit in this meeting today. But is there anything that the two of you would add that you could see help that the BAC could contribute value to with regard to the issues on your plate? You've got there's a lot of big decisions to be made in this tumultuous time. So what is it that we can do that's most helpful?
Well, definitely providing your feedback on the COVID-19 relief funds, Nolan, as well as the alcohol tax revenues would be very helpful. Those are two really big things.
This is Cameron. I would just add that, it's helpful to know that it's been pretty clear that revenue replacement is not an option for those funds, but that areas of police and fire are assumed by our legal to be related to COVID money. And I would also say that that we're really trying to think strategically about how to create some economic stimulus relief. I mean, we just passed an item at our last meeting relieving some of the fees related to transportation and taxis. We're thinking about how to create as much relief as we can. Obviously, you know that there's been a couple of small business stimulus packages passed at the municipal level. There's been a lot of this discussion throughout the city about a lot of confusion around the federal funding and the state funding and the difference of money and how they relate to each other. And so, but the bottom line is that our small businesses are suffering, and that we're thinking really strategically about how to provide as much support as we can. So, and both and I are really looking forward to hearing ideas and your feedback and incorporating those into decisions that will come.
Sure.
Nolan, this is Carla. May I have a question, please?
Yes, go ahead, Carla.
Through the chair, Cameron, you mentioned that there was going to be discussions with the community about the use of the taxes, the alcohol tax money that has come in. And not that I disagree with that, but wasn't the whole idea that this money was already destined for certain programs, and that's how it was put forth to the voters? Or is this something different that you're looking at?
And so the language was that there were particular areas that this needed to focus on, and that's one of the reasons why it's centering around health, centering around prevention, public safety, and so there's specific areas that it's focused in, but there was not specific programs that were identified, and so we are going to sort of that's I think part of the work that needs to happen next is the amounts that are allocated to certain areas, and and where those priorities are. So I think there was intention when it was passed to both create some clarity about the issues that it was meant to address and some of the specific areas that it had to be focused in, but there is some options in terms of the amounts and the specific programs that it's focused on. So there is some room for decisions to be made by both the committees, informed by the public, and then ultimately the assembly.
Thank you.
Sure.
And also, I'd just really quickly, Nolan, that the appropriations to the 3 different categories, there's definitely discussion as to how much should go to homelessness versus to APD versus to early intervention, prevention efforts.
Mr. Chairman, this is
it might be on my end, but it seems like you're cutting out a little bit, Suzanne.
Oh shoot, sorry about that.
I actually heard her loud and clear, so.
Well, that's me. I see that Jonathan has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, I just wanted to express to the assembly members to kind of follow up on Carla's question that I think it's really important that the assembly and the administration in this process stick to the categories that were put forth in front of the voters. I was actually in a meeting with one of the proponents of the alcohol tax probably late last week, and they were a little disconcerted that perhaps there might be movement on the assembly to use that money for things that were in categories not put before the voters. And so I think we've asked the voters for something pretty extraordinary here, which is to self-tax in Alaska, and they've said yes. And so I think we really just need to make sure that whatever process we use, that we respect what was put before them, and that we end up using it in a way that just follows that spirit. And especially if we ever want to go back to people again and ask them for more money. So just thanks for the presentation and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, this is Cameron. I just respond to that real quick, and I appreciate that so much. That you're right. This is a really important opportunity for us to demonstrate that we do what we say we're going to do, and that we follow through with that. We do it in a very transparent way, and that we also report back. And so we go through a process that is in line with what we said we were going to do. And that we share in information soon after in terms of what the impact of that or what the result of that was. And so I think that we're all really sort of knowing that that's important and that this is an opportunity for us to really build a greater trust with the city and the people of Anchorage.
I would just add that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Thanks, Nolan. I would just add that the intent is definitely to stick to the categories that were put before the voters, and that at this point, as Cameron had mentioned earlier, looking at the specifics and then how much will be allocated to each category, since that actually wasn't included in the piece that was voted on. And thank you so much for bringing that up, Jonathan. Thank you, Nolan.
Yes, yeah, and I really appreciate the point that Jonathan is making. It was, it is to self-tax in Alaska, to have the voters approve that, and also all of the issues. The biggest talking point of opposition is: do we really trust, the muni administration and the assembly to do it with the money what they say they're going to do? Like that was always a thing people said. So that credibility, I think, is certainly important. Let's see then. Are there any other questions on assembly business from this group? All right. Not hearing anything at this point. One thing that I do want to mention is that there's a conversation thread going with Alyssa and I and Meg Zalatel and Austin Quinn Davidson and I think that's all who's on it, and they're trying to get our input on some ideas for the use of the CARES funding, and so I think that there might be, there really are some opportunities to weigh in on the best uses of some of that funding. So that may be a conversation that we bring full circle. I think it might warrant even a work session for this group to look at that and make some detailed recommendations to the assembly. I'm going to go ahead and move on in the agenda to the Anchorage School District, and I think Mr. Ratliff is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to attempt to share my screen so you can show. We're going to show the a fund balance projection that we did for our fiscal year ending June 30, and we showed this to the board, I guess, last week. So we wanted to share with you guys, kind of give you a picture of where we think we're going to end up. And if I can figure it out, there we go. You guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the format that we present to our school board and our fund balance projections. The first page just shows where we think we're going to end our revenue, and a lot of this is kind of up in the air because we're trying to figure out the whole what we're not going to spend and not going to receive due to the COVID and the closures for the schools. You can see kind of walking down the line of things with the bigger variances, the student fees. We couldn't participate in fourth quarter sports. We ended up refunding a bunch of student fees, so that's obviously going to be lower than what we anticipated. Other local revenues, this includes our usage of fund balance, which we don't actually receive as a actual revenue source, so it's always going to be a negative variance if we have a usage of fund balance in there. So that's expected. And then the other things, in here we have some earthquake reimbursement funds for things we spent for trying to clean up the November 30 earthquake that we didn't get in the prior fiscal year. So we spent it last year. We expect to get the money this year, hopefully. And then at the bottom, we've kind of normalized what it would have been without the earthquake, so you can see what our an actual variance is. But the other kind of item of significance would be our federal impact aid, and this is just based on the number of students in that live on base predominantly. So fewer students showed up on base or last year, so our application ended up being less. We get less money. Some of this money is also fairly unpredictable as the federal government closes out prior years. So we're getting money from 2017, 18, 19 applications in various amounts, and it's really unpredictable as to how much we're going to get and the timing of it. For those of you that don't know, the Federal Impact Aid is a federal program that pays local school districts funds for non-taxable land. So the students on military bases, students on non-taxable Indian lands, those are the ones that are that we get federal funding for. And it's really to offset the not being able to issue property taxes on those lands. Is there any questions on the revenue side as we go through it?
See, any questions from the group?
We were happy on our interest earnings. In the month of March, our interest earnings really took a dive after the nation started shutting down and the stock market dropped dramatically. In the month of March, we took about a little over $2 million hit on our interest earnings as we use a mark-to-market approach on the value of our assets. But then in April and now in May, those have recovered quite a bit. So we're pretty happy about that. So we're not going to show a loss on our interest earnings. Scrolling down to our expenditures, everything seems to be fairly well in line with where we expected it. This other category, predominantly, it's going to be why that is going to, we're anticipating that being a little over budget, is with regards to how much leave our employees are using. So as folks haven't been in the buildings, they've been requesting less leave usage. But overall, we seem to be sitting in pretty good shape between our salaries and benefits. It's just really a matter of who we got everything cleaned up, and we saved quite a bit of money on in our substitutes. Generally, this line shows pretty far over budget to the tune we spend maybe $10 million a year in a little over $10 million in a normal year with substitutes. And since we've out of the buildings the last few months, our sub cost has gone down by a couple $1 million too. So we've had savings in areas, and we'll have new costs in areas. But a lot of this extra help and the addendum that we pay for sports, activity buses that we can pay for sports, those things we really saw a pretty substantial amount of savings in those areas as we shut the buildings down. We did have other cost increases that are going to be reflected with respect to purchasing new equipment, Chromebooks, hotspots for wireless internet access, some laptops for staff to work from home, addenda for teachers to go out and create course materials, things like that. So we do have increased costs. We have some decreased costs. But overall, we're sitting pretty good. Our utilities expect to be under budget. That's another fairly big one. And that's due to us, kind of going into what they call summer mode, turning down the heat, turning off the electricity in areas, or whatever they really do to save energy over the summer, not having the same amount of garbage pickup. So they save money in utilities. I think what other interesting things sent on here. One of the biggest variances is this medical cost right here. And this is, we budget for everyone to take medical, and then when someone waives medical, we don't make a contribution to whatever plan they're in. So if you're in the teacher's plan and you waive medical insurance, then we don't pay the teachers union that medical cost. But then we have this negative offset to try to recapture all that cost and put it elsewhere in our budget. So really, we're trying to estimate how many folks are going to waive medical or not be hired throughout the year through these attrition estimates, and then put those back into other areas of the budget. So that's why you see these negative numbers here. But it'll offset these where we expect to see savings all throughout it. But overall, after we subtract out what we're going to spend on earthquake, we expect to be within about 1.7% to the good on our budget versus actual. Is there any real questions on our expenditures?
Let's see, any questions for Mr. Ratliff?
Okay. And then the last part of it, what seems to be get talked about the most would be our really, here's our calculation of what our fund balance we think it's going to be by the end of the year. This is where we started, about $54 million in undesignated funds, which includes $24 million in unassigned funds, another $25 million in bond rating. That's the money we reserve, which is about 10% of our property tax revenue for a calendar year, and that's to preserve our AAA bond rating that the city holds. And that's just the agreement we have with the MOA to be able to keep that bond rating high. And then subsequent years' expenditures is $5 million or so that we anticipated spending in this year's budget from our savings in this year's budget. But overall, our revenues and expenditures were expected to be about $10 million different. So happy about that. And then in the year, about $64 million in undesignated fund balance. When we talk about the state cap that they impose on how much money we can carry over is 10% of expenditures. So that's this calculation here. If we have 613 expenditures, other uses are payments to other funds. This is predominantly money that may have to go to shore up our student nutrition fund as we've continued to pay employees and distribute meals, but a lot of those meals that we're distributing may not be reimbursable through the federal programs. We anticipate taking a pretty hefty loss in our food service program and having to backfill that with some general fund money. And then we add in our on behalf contributions from other funds to get the basis for calculating the percentage of fund balance that the state caps us at. So right now we're projecting to end about 10.4% of fund balances compared to expenditures, and that's the $64 million divided into the $616 million. The state cap for this year has been waived, so we're not going to be penalized for going over the 10% cap this year. So we don't anticipate having to go and assign money to other projects or do whatever at the end of the year to make that get under the 10% as we have in some other years. But really, this is our fund balance projection. This is what we show the board just to keep them informed of where we think we stand. Overall, even with the pandemic, we think we're really sitting pretty good right now, in a good position to weather some of the storm. Our biggest concern right now really is what our enrollment is going to be for next year. How many people are going to pull their kids out and do homeschool? How many families just aren't going to show back up? That's a real kind of a wild card, and we don't have a good sense of what that's going to be. So having a little bit of extra cushion in our fund balance going into next year will certainly be a good thing and help us sleep a little better at night. And that's all of my presentation for this.
Okay. Anything for Mr. Ratliff then? Any questions before we move on?
Nolan, it looks like Jed has a question, and
Alyssa. Okay. Oh yeah, Jed, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe you kind of touched on it right at the end there about this sort of question about how many students are actually going to return. But is the district anticipating a change in methodology for student count? Because I know that impacts state funding and how much the district gets in state funding, and really in light of whether schools remain closed next fall during the student count period.
Right, yeah, and that's one of the other things that's we've talked about. We really don't have any guidance from the state on. The state, our count is conducted the first 20 days in October, 21st, or the 20 school days in October. So if that's unable to happen, frankly, I don't know what would happen if they would just delay the count until later in the year, or pay us based on projections, or I'm really not sure. The other thing that's kind of hindered us is we've projected increase in our intensive needs students, predominantly in the preschool area. So as school shut down, we couldn't get out and test those students to see if they had the intensive needs qualifications. So that's another kind of area of concern is if we haven't tested these students, we can't qualify them intensive needs, which is then a further decrease in our revenue stream. So I think we're kind of in a wait and see what the state directs us to do on the count period.
All right. And then Alyssa, looks like you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Nolan. So I actually have two now. So first was just making sure I understood you right, Andy, that even though you don't think you're going to be reimbursed for nutritional services, because of the budget surplus, you're not in a bad spot because of it. It's not that you need assistance in funding that or anything like that. Is that correct?
I think we'll be okay. Yeah, I think, they're projecting between $1 million or $1.5 million dollar deficit in their fund. There's savings in other funds, like our transportation fund has some savings in it because we weren't running all our buses. We weren't paying all of our Reliant contract costs, savings in fuel and repairs and things. So we have money in that fund that could be directed over to student nutrition as well. So I don't, if we weren't to get any additional funding for this, I think we would still be okay.
Okay. And then my second inquiry is related to JED. So you were talking about teachers not being able to do evaluations. I know that PIC, the Program for Infants and Children, they're providing all their services on Zoom at this point. And it's actually, as somebody who's using those services for their little one, it's really effective. And so I don't know if that might be an option, or I'm curious if that's something that the ASD is looking into, is performing those evaluations virtually. Or
Yes, I
is
think
it
they are.
just like you can't connect with the students? Sorry.
Right, and I know they're doing a lot of virtual help with the special education students that we currently have, but I'm not really sure how well it works for the evaluation piece. And they may be doing some of it, but I'm probably just not aware of it. Because when they go and evaluate students, they typically don't let the finance folks know. So we're kind of the last to know on some things.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just curious. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay. Not hearing anything, so I believe the next item on our agenda is you, Lance.
All right.
Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think a couple things I want to talk about, just to start off on the CARES Act. And I want to make sure that we have some time for the chair and the vice chair to maybe share some of the information that Assemblymember LaFrance mentioned that they had shared with the Assembly. But there's a lot going on, obviously, and not in any particular order, but I want to talk about CARES Act as it relates to sources, timing, and purpose. And one of the sources that is coming to the municipality, as I mentioned, that the municipality is going to be receiving funds from the state of Alaska. Every state was issued money when they had a certain level of population that they had to be distributed out. For Alaska, the state of Alaska got $1.25 billion. Roughly half of that has to be distributed to local communities. The other half the state is keeping for their response to COVID-19. So for Anchorage, the amount coming to the municipality of Anchorage is a little over $156 million. So earlier this week, the administration had a conversation with the state because we had some concerns about the grant agreement that was sent to us to receive the $156 million. We got some clarity on that earlier this week, and as a result, we are advancing the required documentation for the agreement to the state to receive the money one of the things that the state required was action by our legislative body to receive the money. So on Tuesday night, the administration put together a laid on the table item, which is basically an assembly document that was not in the regular agenda or an addendum to the agenda. And with the assembly's support, they passed this resolution, which allows the municipality to receive the $156+ million as it becomes available to Anchorage. And it's one of the I guess the two key parts to this is we will not be receiving $156 million all at one time. Neither will any jurisdiction for that matter. So what happens is in the agreement is the municipality will receive a total of $156 million this year, but we are going to get it in 3 stages. The first payment to us will be a little over $116 million. The way the agreement is written is that we have to spend 80% of that before we can ask for the next $20 or $19 million in change, and then we have to spend a significant portion of that before we can apply for the third or the last roughly $20 million. So how we do that and where we do that, as Assemblymember LaFrance and Perez Padilla mentioned, the administration and the Assembly are looking at, where do we spend those allocations of funds, and I think the Budget Advisory Commission having a role in that through a work session process will be important to the decisions the administration makes and important to the decisions that the Assembly will be making on where these funds will be going. So with these types of funds coming from the state, there's a lot of flexibility on how we can use these funds, and as Assemblymember Perez Padilla mentioned, we can't literally just flat out pay for lost revenues for permit fees that we're not going to get, or for a lost revenue that we have in our budget. It does allow us to pay for the labor for our public safety folks. So we are looking at, maybe making some lemonade there on how we do that. It allows us to apply it to continue and maybe promote some of the programs that the Assembly and the administration have put together, whether it be small business or assistance, whether or not we can or cannot apply it to utilities. We're looking at all of those things, but the first step in the process was to make sure that we have the money. And then this is the resolution that was passed on Tuesday night. I'm going to ask Lila after the meeting to go ahead and send this to you just as an FYI, just to keep you in the loop and you're informed. We are putting together, the administration is looking at a variety of options on how we could do this and the timing we could do this. It is going to be important to provide immediate relief, as Assemblymember Perez Padilla mentioned, to our residences, and so making sure that we are doing as much of that as possible. So I think I'm going to stop right there before I go to the other CARES money that we are getting. So if there's questions on this particular piece, I'll do my best to ask now, and then I would ask you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the BAC to start thinking about your willingness and the timing to start getting together and talking about what these funds could be used for here in the next month or two.
I think we have a question or comment from Alyssa.
Yeah, thanks, Nolan. So, Lance, can these funds be used for, either payments directly to utility company in order to keep people's power on, or could it be used for grants to individuals that are specific to either rent or utilities? Can these funds be used in that way?
I don't know the answer to your first question. I think the answer to your second part is yes. For utilities, the interesting thing about, as my understanding of the CARES Act, is it cannot be used for replacement of revenue in the public sector. I think it can be in the private sector. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that is what I recall, and maybe others who have been staying up late at night and reading the Treasury guidance more so than I have, they have a different answer. But the thing about the utilities is, when people are not paying So our utilities are public utilities, and since they are losing revenue, one view could be that providing the money to the utilities and lost revenue is revenue replacement. However, similar to the rental assistance program that the municipality and I think many jurisdictions are doing, the rental assistance doesn't necessarily go directly to the person that owes the rent. It goes to the person or the property owner in which the rent is due. So it offsets that lost revenue in the rent from individuals. So if and I believe that is the process on how we can use CARES funds to help people with rental assistance. We literally provide a program to landlords to help them receive that lost revenue, and so they can then pay their mortgages. The utilities, it's not 100% clear, at least to me.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, I think if we created a program where businesses couldn't pay their utility bills, and we set up a program similar to rental assistance, and it was utility assistance, I do think there might be some opportunity there.
Looks like we've got a question from Lindsay.
Yeah, I just had a comment on that. So I believe it's SB 241 that was passed, and that allows utilities to set up a regulatory asset to recover costs incurred, related to COVID-19. And so I don't know that this funding would be used in that way, because similarly, public utilities are regulated and have to, follow their tariff. So there isn't really a lot of latitude in terms of giving discounts or charging different customers different rates. And so there's not really that ability, but I do know that for, I believe, 2-9 Lone Star, at least for the time being, are not disconnecting commercial or residential customers for non-payment, and that is also in connection with the provisions of SB 241.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. Alex Slifka, the CFO, and I were talking about this item as well, and the SB, the Senate bill, and then the influence in the RCA. If the question would be, if utilities are not receiving payment, are they going to adjust their rates for that? And at the end of the day, are we solving the problem or addressing the issue, or are we compounding it by lost revenues and then we increase rates? So I'm not sure. There's a lot of moving parts that aren't at least completely clear to us, and maybe there's some opportunities inside CARES. Also, I'm aware that there is a potential that new guidance can come out and new additional revenues outside the CARES Act could be afforded to communities and states. And so I don't think we're done on the guidance, and we're not done on the amount of money that might be available. So, Lindsay, thank you for the clarification on your end. I appreciate that.
Lance, Nolan here. One other thing. In a prior meeting, and I heard this elsewhere too, I think you had mentioned that there was some consideration in Congress of allowing these CARES funds to go towards revenue replacement in some circumstances. So to your knowledge, that hasn't gone anywhere?
So thank you, Nolan. So on May 28th, the Treasury Department put out new guidance beyond the guidance they put out on April 14th, I think it was. I'm not done reading all of that. Some of the initial review that I have, they haven't changed that piece yet. So I don't think it says in there that the revenue can be, the CARES Act funds can be used for revenue replacement. It provides a lot of opportunities for jurisdictions that are budgeted in their regular budget to use CARES Act funds to do those things. So there might be some opportunity on that front, but I haven't seen language that Treasury that says, yeah, if you lost money in sales tax or other things like that, or property taxes or motel or bed taxes, that you can actually use this money for direct replacement. I was on a call with many local communities through AML, Alaska Municipal League. communities like Juneau that are they're a lot more reliant on revenue from sales taxes than obviously a municipality is, and so they're really going to be struggling on how they have the ability to do that. So I know that the city and borough in the Kenai area is looking at generally the same kind of sense that Anchorage is, which is if we have the ability to cover some expenses from police and fire, as I think Cameron had mentioned, then that might free up some dollars that we otherwise had budgeted, but for other purposes. But we're looking at that to make sure that we are maintaining and staying within the eligibility of the Treasury guidance, which was one of the key reasons we were hesitant initially to sign the state agreement. We wanted to make sure that the state did not restrict us any more than the Treasury guidance, and it also allowed us the opportunity and flexibility in the event the Treasury guidance changes. We have the ability in our application of the state CARES money to follow the most current Treasury, and we got that confirmation from the state officials. So that was reassuring, and it was good to know. But something straight out of Congress that says, yeah, you can use it for revenue replacement, we don't see that yet.
Yeah, and I'd imagine it would probably have to be action by Congress rather than a Treasury guidance issue. But I don't know that for a fact.
I don't know either. So that is what's going on. I think I just wanted to just summarize my comments on the CARES pieces, and then maybe Andy can add something. You can jump in. So this is just one category of money coming to the municipality from the National CARES Act. This is money that's basically being shepherded through the state. They are the conduit of the money coming to local jurisdictions. In addition to this, we are applying for, and in some cases received, a direct allocation of money from the CDC, from Health, from HUD. We've asked the police department, the fire department are applying for grants that have been put into national programs for public safety, and they've applied for those things for basically response, preparation, and looking forward into the future in the event that we have a similar event or a spike in this event. We've applied for some of those resources. We have not received those yet. In some cases, we know that we're going to get money. For example, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, they have basically said, money is coming to you. It's for operations and capital. In some cases, it's just a straight amount of money for FAA. And so those funds are they're more prescriptive to what they can be used for. Basically, for FAA, they have to be used on aviation, on Merrill Field, but they can be used on operating and capital. We're looking at how that plan would come together. We would then share that plan with the Assembly. Obviously, if the result is the FAA wants to, or the Merrill Field wants to spend some of that FAA CARES money on a capital improvement that's not in their approved capital budget, we would ask them to do that. We're looking at some ways in which we can assist the businesses on Merrill Field with the CARES money, so we're looking at how we do that. And then, so a variety of, and we're keeping track of all of those things as they come in. The library just applied for something for the Department of Education, so there's a lot of opportunity from the CARES funds. I think this pile of money, this 156, is going to be the one that's going to be the most of interest because, one, it has a pretty short fuse for a lot of money that's available for a variety of things. So we're working diligently on getting this plan together, and I think the administration will have some things immediately that they want to direct these funds to, and then some things they have not decided on and been working with the Assembly on what they would want to spend these things on. So that'll be a conversation as we move through the year. So that's about all I have on the CARES Act, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. Questions for Lance? All right. Let's see. I'm not seeing any, so I think we can move on. And we had more from Andy, I think, about the school district.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the school district, we will receive a little over $12 million of the CARES Act money, so not nearly as substantial as what the municipality is having to allocate. But we basically outlined a plan for what we intend to spend the funds on already. The first thing we want to do, the board voted to bring back the health teachers that we had to cut during the budget prep for the FY21 budget. And that's a little over $3 million for the 29 teachers that we are bringing back, or the positions. Another chunk of it, about $4 million, is dedicated towards IT equipment and personnel to manage the equipment to go to a 1-to-1 ratio for grades 3 to 12. These next items haven't been approved by the board. We've discussed them with the board. Everyone seems to be pretty supportive of it. But it's really to get to a 1-to-1 ratio for those upper grades and to help in case we need to go back into distance learning scenarios. So all the students have access to devices. What we're seeing is, we handed out, I think it was around 10,000 different devices to students, and maybe a family picked up one device, but they have 3 or 4 kids that are needing to use it at any given time, so it wasn't working out. So we're trying to get to a 1-to-1 device to student ratio there. We're also putting money into hotspots, so the students that don't have internet access or can't get internet access otherwise, they have ability to connect and do their work online. And then we have about $3 million that is allocated towards a variety of things like summer school. We don't exactly know how much that's going to cost. That's a lot dependent on usage. And then PPE and equipment for sanitation supplies. That would be like cloth masks, disposable masks, hand sanitizer, other cleaning products and equipment, just to kind of keep our schools clean if they were open. And then a few other things. About $600,000 gets allocated to charter schools. About $600,000 in indirect cost, and then about $750,000 is allocated to private schools as equitable services are required for this money. And equitable services allows private schools within the district boundaries to collect, or for us to spend on their behalf, a proportionate amount based on their enrollment versus the district's enrollment. So if all the private schools participate, the district's on the hook for around $750,000. We don't know exactly how many will participate. I think in the past, when we've offered those services up through other title grants, it's about half the schools that participate. But this is considerably more money than what they would be getting under those other title programs. So we think they're going to be more inclined to go ahead and participate in it. And again, it's similar with the city's money. Our money can always be spent on response to these COVID activities. So we're fairly limited in what we can do, even though when the governor vetoed the $30 million of one-time funding, it was because we got this CARES money and he was going to allocate that out. So while we did end up getting a little more money through the CARES Act allocation than we would have through that $30 million allocation, our spending is more restricted, if that makes sense. So that's where we're at with the district. We just need to get this approved by the board and get it implemented for the following year. And our funds, I think, can be spent through September of 2021. So we have considerably more time to actually spend down these funds than the city does as well.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Ratliff. Let's see, and are we other questions, or can we keep rolling? Not seeing any hands up. And I think we can keep moving. So I think next up on the agenda, Lance, you had wanted Alyssa and I to give a little update on the assembly work session that was held a couple of weeks ago, because we both spoke at that.
Yep.
Fairly briefly at that. And so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I am going to share a couple of slides from presentations that I've been giving. And so let me see if I can pull that up right now. I am able to share my screen, I think. Let's see. Do folks see this? See my screen there?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to talk about this really quickly. I've been since COVID hit. I have been doing a speaking circuit a lot to Rotaries and to Anchorage Chamber of Commerce, and at the invitation of several other groups, the Downtown Partnership, the 4 Acre Group, the Small Business Development Center, in their daily briefings. And so what I have been focusing on through my main job, and where I direct the Center for Economic Development, is kind of helping folks kind of put into context what businesses are wrestling with and where the economy is right now, and that's been a constantly changing picture. But to share just a few thoughts with you guys, this graph that I have here is showing this is what was going on with employment growth in the economy in the couple of years leading up to COVID hitting, in really when we started feeling effects, where it was really March, in a major way, March. So we were coming out of this recession that lasted about 3 years. This graph goes back to 2015, and you can see all the negative territory. That's where we were losing jobs over the same month the prior year, and we had this recovery that started in late 2018 at the statewide level, and it was kind of a weak recovery. And you can see that we had some flat months in there and some negative months in there, but we were in positive territory. And at that point, before COVID, we were on path to get back to our 2015 unemployment levels in about 7 or 8 years at the rate of growth we were doing. So we were in a pretty weak recovery, and so it's kind of important to understand that economically, that when COVID hit, it sort of took a sledgehammer to any sort of projections that we might make about what the economy was doing. But I think that we've got this kind of underlying fragility to our economy, even when COVID is not part of the issue. And so we've almost got two problems stacked on top of each other. And the first problem being tied to lower oil prices for the most part, as well as the issues around state spending that are tied to that. And then on top of that, we have oil prices have really suffered during COVID as well, for reasons related to the pandemic and reasons unrelated to it. And so at one point, I think we dealt with that crazy news that oil was trading on futures markets, that West Texas was trading at negative rates, where you have to pay people to take crude deliveries off your hands, which is a very weird thing to have happen. So you've probably seen a version of this graph, and I haven't updated this in a while because I haven't given a presentation in a couple of weeks. But this was our unemployment claims by week, where we suddenly saw we have around 800 or 1,000 or 1,200 claims in a normal week for the last several months or even years, and then suddenly we have 14,000 jobs a week lost, and 12,000 a week lost, and 7,000 a week lost. And so the level of unemployment and the speed with which we lost jobs was really terrifying. If this graph doesn't make you a little queasy, you probably have a stronger stomach than I do. And even though the rate of job losses has decreased, and there's probably been quite a bit of rehiring going on, the job numbers are not great at all. I just saw that the state's unemployment release as of today showed that there are still there's around almost 50,000 continuing unemployment claims, people who are continuing to file, on top of about 7,000 or so new claims, so where people are continuing to lose jobs. And so it's really we're not in fantastic shape as far as employment goes. I'll skip that, but I've also been paying attention to some of the small business data that's out there, mostly derived from surveys, and this is a national survey that was asking businesses how long they could survive without having to permanently close their doors during pandemic conditions. And these were the different responses from these different industries. If they were sure that they would survive after 4 months of a pandemic. So at the top there, banking and finance and professional services, 63% of those businesses said, yes, we'd survive 4 months of this, which still leaves a lot that said they wouldn't survive. And then at the bottom, 30% for bars and restaurants, and 35% for retailers and non-grocery retailers. That means that less than a third of bars and restaurants thought that they could survive 4 months of the pandemic without permanently closing. So I think that it's worth keeping in mind how serious the situation is. With the economy reopening, we think things are still depressed. This is what consumer spending was looking like as of May 7th. This source of information is trying to be as current as possible. But you can see here, Alaska's consumer spending overall was down 15%, down 20% for the country. But in certain categories, like here's restaurants and hotels, down over 50%, transportation down over 50%, arts, entertainment, and recreation way down. So these are all things that have a lot of implications for us and our economy. And so I'm going to kind of leave it at that, and I don't want to go into too much detail. I want to leave some time for other discussion. But so I exit my screen sharing, I think there. So that's what some of my take on things has been. Alyssa, there's opportunity for you to make some comments as well and share anything you want to share.
Yeah, thanks, Nolan, and Lance. Appreciate the opportunity. So what I shared with the Assembly was more along the lines of, kind of what we are doing with our CARES Act money. So I am the director of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership for NITI, who doesn't know as my day job. And as such, we received a relatively small amount of money, but not insubstantial. So we will receive $91,000 for Alaska for manufacturing. And so I spoke with some of the other states that are receiving equally small amounts of money. And one of the really interesting things that Hawaii was doing is something that we are going to do, is they're creating a website template. So, which is actually relatively low cost and really would help businesses to be able to get online, especially those who manufacture things that are fairly specifically purchased by tourists. And, we have a lot of businesses in Alaska that are not online. And it can be just a bit too big a lift to try and start from nothing. And so creating a website template complete with purchasing, where someone can, for the most part, kind of plug and play, is something that we think is going to be really helpful. And while we'll make this, in theory, kind of for manufacturers, we are working with the Small Business Development Center and others, so this would actually be available for any small business. So we're doing that. We're also hiring, again, in conjunction with Small Business Development Center, we're hiring an industrial engineer to help primarily manufacturers to look at their layout and their workflows and understand how they can keep people safe while still maintaining their efficiency. If you are producing, especially food products, you have a really hot, humid environment potentially in your facility, and so you bring in a fan to help make people more comfortable. And what you've done is you've just spread people's biological material all across the room, regardless of how far apart they are. And so, helping people to work through some of those issues and figure out how they can comply with any remaining health mandates and how they can keep themselves and their employees safe is going to be pretty important moving forward. Whether or not we have another spike or just to prepare for something like this happening again in the future. So that's some of the things that we're doing with the funding that we got. Something else that I have been putting together, I actually might be able to share my screen here and give you a sneak peek. Here we go. So I think folks should be able to see my screen now. Is we've been going through our data as we connect manufacturers to small businesses and healthcare healthcare organizations to get PPE. So can people see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So since COVID started, or kind of came to Alaska, something that we've been doing at the MEP is we've been helping manufacturers who want to make PPE to connect with people who need it, and vice versa. People who need PPE and can't get it to be able to connect to different sources of it that are made locally in Alaska. Before COVID-19 started in Alaska, we did not have anyone who was making PPE. Since then, we have around 50 manufacturers, a little bit more than that, who are making some kind of PPE. And so we were looking at, what are the trends? What's been going on, for demand for different types of PPE? So I'll just briefly scroll through this. We're going to dusty this up and put this out, hopefully by the end of the week, and give a little bit more detail about what's going on. But I just wanted to share some of the trends that we've been seeing. You can see that face shields, we had a lot of demand initially, kind of dropped down for a while, came back up, and now it's almost nothing. Whereas gloves and cloth masks, the demand has, in the case of cloth masks, kind of stayed stable after some initial peaks. And with gloves, it's actually kind of increased, and we're potentially reaching kind of a flat spot. N95s is another one where as we've seen the economy reopening, we've seen an increased demand there. Hand sanitizer, I think the reason why this one is so low as we reach toward the present here is really just because we've kind of tapped out our local demand. So I just wanted to share some of those trends that we're seeing. It's been pretty interesting to look at what people are needing in terms of PPE and what we can produce in this state, and what's happening with that going forward, especially as we reopen, but also as places in the lower 48 and outside the country not really come back online, but are finally able to significantly ramp their production back or up. We don't make N95s, en masse. We have, actually, I think Brendan Babb with the municipality is the only one who's making them. But just to use them as an example, the places like 3M that actually make them are finally getting to the point where they can meet demand. And so when those shipments start coming to Alaska and become available for more people outside of just your Tier 1 hospitals, we're obviously going to see the demand for our locally produced PPE drop. We simply can't compete from a cost perspective, and for the most part, the manufacturers that we have want to get back to making whatever it was they made, whether that's vodka or clothing or different things like that. So we only have a handful of manufacturers who seem like they're really kind of in it for the long term. But yeah, I think with that, I will stop and ask for questions.
This is Carla. I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand on this. Is there something I can do to raise my hand? Anyway, I just wanted to make a comment. The state of Alaska and the federal government have made it pretty profitable for people to not go back to work. I'm in one of those industries where the kids don't make a lot of money. They're making a lot more money staying home, and I'm having a hard time hiring them back. They don't want to come back. They don't want to come to work. The state of Alaska never bothers to ask me whether or not they've refused my offer of work. And I admire the ones that did come back to work because they're literally working for less than what they could make when their friends are staying home and doing nothing. I mean, I admire the hell out of them. So that's the biggest problem I'm having in my industry here in Anchorage is hiring back those workers. It just made it too profitable to stay home. I hate to say it. And the sad thing is I'm wondering what's going to happen when it all ends. And now you have a ton of workers trying to go back and scramble for jobs, all at the same time or so. So, interesting.
One thing I tossed in there is that it's really not the state that did that. It's the federal extra 600.
When you file for at the state level, they say, did you refuse any offer of work? The state never checks in with me, on a regular basis or whatever, and says, did they refuse work? Did you know what I mean? I know the state's overwhelmed. I get it. That we can't police people. They've got to help. They've got to take it upon themselves to police themselves, which they're not going to do. But I'm just saying, this is the conundrum that we're in right now. I mean, I can't even find people to work. And I certainly can't afford to pay them more than what unemployment's paying them.
It looks like Jonathan, your hand is up.
You're on mute, Jonathan.
You're muted if you're talking, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks. One too many Zoom calls. I just wanted to sort of back up what Carla is saying is we're talking about how to use the CARES money. The federal beige book came out last week, and they did a lot of talking to unemployed individuals, and there were three big things that really came up as to why people might not be returning to work. And those top three things were, one is that they're afraid. They're afraid their employers aren't going to take care of them. They're not going to keep them safe. The second one was childcare. And we know that most childcare operations here in the state, everywhere, but particularly in the state of Alaska, are shoestring operations that have almost zero margin. You're almost guaranteed to lose money in some ways. And the third thing was the issue that Carla is raising about, the federal government and Congress, chose that $600 amount very specifically because it is the magic number which makes the most people whole, and for some people, particularly in food service, that means it makes them more than whole, and there's not a lot of incentive to go back to work. And so, as we think about restarting the economy, we have to think about what instills and creates confidence both in our consumer, what helps our businesses, and for our businesses, that means encouraging people to get back to work, and that means addressing worker concerns. And worker concerns are safety, childcare, and also this incentive of not working because you're made whole by this $600 payment that goes away on July 31st if Congress doesn't extend it. So, just want to give Carla some emotional, moral support to say the data backs up exactly what she's saying, and also say, as we're thinking about how to use the CARES funding, that we ought to be thinking about these areas as a way to stimulate the return, the safe and public health efficacious return of individuals to the work environment, because it's that sort of confidence in addressing those sorts of issues that are going to reheal the economy. Okay, with that, I'll get off my soapbox and say thank you to Carla for raising the issue.
Yeah, I really appreciate those comments, Jonathan. I think that those are all really excellent points. There are more issues to consider than the amount of the funding, for sure. Even though I do understand the frustrations of a lot of business owners, because I hear the exact comment from others that it's hard to get people to return back to work. And in a lot of cases, businesses that have received PPP funding, they're trying to rehire their workers and have that funding covered, have that payroll cost covered through the program, and they can't, and that's created a little bit of awkwardness for them as well.
Hallelujah, brother.
Let's see. Any other questions or comments? Caitlin, I saw your hand up for a second. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I did. Thank you. It was just a small question about your presentation, Alyssa. I think that website sounds awesome. My question was if it was going to be available for business-to-business manufacturers, or if that was to end users only. I just was trying to get a sense of how big of a campaign and platform this would be.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Caitlin. If I'm understanding you correctly, the website template would really be available to anyone. So whether or not it's a business-to-business focus or direct-to-consumer focus, it would be available for everyone. If we notice that there are significant differences and needs between those two foci, then I think we could make two. It's my understanding that creating the template is not so expensive that we wouldn't be able to do a little bit of assistance there. Did that answer your question? Is that where you were going?
It was. It's a very granular question. I appreciate the broader conversation. Thanks for entertaining my detailed question. Thanks.
Very good. Let's see. Unless there's any other questions, we can probably go ahead and move on. I think because I have a hard stop a couple minutes till 1 o'clock, so I have to jump onto another call that I'm leading. So let's see. So Lance, I think it's your court again on alcohol tax.
Yes, thank you. I think most of the stuff that I was going to mention, Suzanne and Cameron did a great job. I think the interest of the BAC on making sure that we are allocating this as to the voters' intent towards health, prevention, and public safety is the key. I know that my point on this one is to the conversation is getting started in earnest right now. The Assembly is having a lot of conversations about it. They're talking to other they're having these work sessions to follow up on that, and I think they have maybe even some stuff scheduled in August that Cameron may have mentioned. But the alcohol tax is something that I'd like to get the Budget Advisory Commission to do a couple things. Lila sent you, so a couple things have happened on the alcohol tax. One is the structure in which the tax would be managed and collected had gone before the Assembly for introduction on Tuesday night. There's a public hearing on the 23rd of this month to take public testimony. Treasury did a lot of the lift on that. They worked with the industry to find out, what can work and what wouldn't work, and they talked to them about timing and So a lot of those efforts, I think, were brought to bear when the administration, primarily with the work of Treasury, put that together. So the structure is in front of the Assembly. The use of what it's going to be applied to is the conversation that is sort of coming up next. So I'm looking ahead at the calendar on the time frame, and Cameron mentioned that they have a time frame for how they want to put this stuff together. I'll get a hold of Desiree, and if it's mature enough to share or ready to share or has been shared, I'll get that link to you as soon as possible.
This is Cameron. It's on the Public Safety Committee page.
Okay.
I'm sure it's other places, but there's a link to the timeline and the different steps that are going to happen over that timeline there. So people can even go there, or you can just grab that link and send it to this group.
Lila will do that. Thank you, Cameron. I appreciate that. So I really don't have much more to share on the alcohol tax, except between the CARES money and the alcohol tax, they're sort of neck and neck in importance. So I'm looking ahead on calendars for when we might want to get together in a work session, and maybe we can finish at the end of this meeting when we talk about next meetings on that. So I don't have much more to add. I think Cameron and Suzanne took my material.
Okay. Very good then. Thank you, Lance. Is there any discussion from the group on alcohol tax stuff? I know this is going to warrant a more detailed discussion. All right. Well, not seeing anything, then the issue of meeting with our department directors. That's the next thing to talk about. Lance wanted to cover some ground on that.
Sure. So I have reached out to all of the directors for those departments that you have expressed an interest in visiting with. And I think the only one I haven't heard back from is Chief Hetrick. So for the Assembly members online, just a quick reminder, there's obviously a lot of interest in the BAC to have some more interaction with departments as they're preparing their budgets. So for the next basically 5 to 6 weeks, I'm going to get BAC members connected to the departments that they have selected to visit with. I asked the BAC members to make sure that they get a chance to review the departments that they selected 2020 budget. If you have any questions, send them to me or the director. And Lila is going to be putting these meetings together for me. So when you see an invite for a Teams meeting from Lila, that's what it's for. So I wanted to remind you, this is where we were at. If there are some changes that you would like to make before we have some further commitments, this would now be the last and best offer. I'm going to preempt Jed a little bit. Jed's term is up on the BAC, and his plate is overfilled, so he will not be able to help us review the departments. He's got project management, engineering, transit, and the capital program, so if there's some interest from BAC members that might want to pick up some of that or switch or do two, there's an opportunity to do that. Otherwise, all the ones that you have are full. Jonathan for finance, I mean that's a big. Nolan, the fire department, that's big. The Tasha health department, man, that's a lot. So going down the list, the library, police, fire, everyone else, M&O. I think that these are the meat of our budget. These are the things that make the everything else is super important. But my point being, this is your chance if you want to switch. Otherwise, departments have been notified, and Lila's going to start setting up meetings. I'm going to ask her if you guys have constraints in the next, basically between now and the 17th of July, it'd be good for me to know that while we're booking them. They're going to be Teams meetings. We'll start with an hour. If you guys want to do more, or if you want to do tours, I mean, obviously practicing social distancing, wearing face coverings are going to be required if you're on a municipal facility, but that's the path that we're going to go forward with. So buckle in and do some reading and look forward to some great information from the departments. That's all I have.
So Lance,
Go ahead.
Lance, you're brokering the introductions to the directors between each of us and that director.
Yep, I've already done it. I haven't told them which BAC member will be with them. I've just told them that in the next, basically between now and the middle of July, there's a lot of interest. The BAC has done it. You may have some executive managers sitting in with you, so I don't know, I'm going to pick one. Real estate. Real estate is under Chris Schutte, the Office of Economic and Community Development. He may want to sit in with Jimmy when he's talking with Robin Ward at real estate. So Bill Falsey may want to sit in with Tasha when we're talking about the health department. So he may not, but we're going to extend the invitation to them as well. So
very good. Very good. Yeah, Lance, I definitely appreciate the amount of work it is to coordinate all of this for you and your team. So thank you very much. I think that for each of us to do this, we're certainly getting high level access to people whose times and schedules are very busy, and so it's good for us to make the most of that and to use this opportunity to give a really thorough review of our departments. So
okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, if you have some conflicts in your schedule between now and July 17th, please let Lila know so that I don't double book or overbook. Okay, that's all I have on the departments. Thank you again, and thanks to the BAC for taking your time to meet with departments.
Yes, thank you. Then I think we can wrap up the next. Now our next meeting our next scheduled meeting is July 9th. We're moving it from the 2nd, so I think so it doesn't conflict with 4th of July week. Is that right?
That would be my recommendation, Mr. Chairman. Please.
Yeah. I would say in the past we haven't met in July, but I think we probably have a little bit of catch up to do from some of the time we missed because of the quarantine. And then also we are probably looking at a work session then as well, Lance, and that's something we'll probably have to coordinate with a doodle poll.
Yes, initially what I'd like to propose is start with the alcohol tax, just to get the sort of the juices flowing if you guys can make it, and I will find that timeline with Cameron. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to do it from 11 to 12, I think on June 18th. That's in 2 weeks. I can't do it at noon because there is an Assembly Budget and Finance Committee that I have to attend. So if your calendars are available on the 18th, in general, I'll try to find an 11 to 12, and then there's an Assembly Public Finance Committee, Budget and Finance, that'll go from a little after 12 to a little after 1. So if you guys are interested in that, I'll get some materials to you on the alcohol tax. Some of the presentations that have been provided to the Public Safety Committee about some ideas, I'll share that with you, but you might want to frame your discussion at a higher level, sort of to Jonathan's comments. As a commission, where is it that you in general think these funds ought to be going to? And then start thinking about what fits inside that framework. But I'd suggest that, and if I can't have everybody, that would be it. And then I have one more comment before you close the meeting.
Yeah, go ahead.
As many of you know, that you serve 3-year terms, and Jed has been amazing. Jed has, I mentioned, he won't be able to continue his service on the committee, and I just want to personally say thank you to Jed. I have worked with him on other boards and commissions. I've always found him to be cordial, professional, responsive, engaged. I think he's been a great commission member, and I think the commission is going to have a loss without him. We are actively looking for new members. We have, Jed's term will be at the end of this month. And so, Jed, again, I want to thank you, and I really appreciate it, and I know the administration does as well. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to echo that as well. Jed's been a fantastic member of this group, and often gone to meetings on our behalf and paid attention to issues and been in a lot of dialogue with Alyssa and I and probably many of you on important issues. So I think Jed's been a real workhorse on this group, and so I really appreciate your efforts. It kind of snuck up on me that your term is up. I didn't realize that, so we're definitely going to miss you, and so thank you for all your work, Jed.
Thank you, Jed.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's it's a little bittersweet. It's really been an honor and a privilege to serve, and I have full faith in the rest of this commission that you all will do great work. So it's been great to get to know you all, and good luck.
Thank you very much. Let's see. With that, I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Who made the motion so we can who?
Carla.
Thank you, Carla. And the second was?
Tasha.
Thank you, Tasha.
All right. And then I think with that we can adjourn. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Bye.